Hi everyone. Just going to give us just a minute as people start signing in, and then we'll get started. Just make sure I can advance the slides. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. This is Connecting Close to Home, Engaging Federal Policymakers in Your Community. Today we are going to be talking about what makes a district visits unique, talk about scheduling a district visit meeting, what a district visit may actually look like, talk about the actions that you would take after a district visit, and then we'll have a panel discussion and a Q&A session with a couple of district staffers. So for our speakers today, my name is Michael Villafranca. I have been with AGU since 2019 as the Senior Specialist for Science Policy and Government Relations. I advocate for the Earth and Space Sciences on Capitol Hill, and I also help the Earth and Space Science community effectively communicate and engage their policymakers, both on the state, local, and federal level. I'm also joined by my colleague, Elizabeth Duffy. Elizabeth is the Government Relations Liaison for the Seismological Society of America, representing SSA before Congress and the administration to advance seismology and the understanding of earthquakes for the benefit of society. Elizabeth helps her clients with strategic communications and advocacy at the federal level and works to inform members of Congress on the importance of federal investment in seismic sciences and geosciences. She has both her Bachelor of Arts in Communications and Policy and Masters of Business Administration from the American University. We're also joined by Sally Anderson. Sally Anderson has been working for Congressman Joe Neguse since 2017, first as the financial director for his election campaign, and since 2019 as the Congressman's Deputy Chief of Staff and District Director. Prior to working with Representative Neguse, Sally was with New Era Colorado, a youth civic engagement organization where she served as a development manager. She's a graduate of the University of Colorado Boulder, where she received a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and Affairs. And last but not least, we're joined by Will McPherson. Will serves as Congressman Tom Cole's District Director, where he oversees all district operations in the 4th District of Oklahoma. He has been with Congressman Cole for 6 years. Prior to joining Cole's office, he served as policy advisor and legislative liaison for Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin. He is a graduate of the University of Oklahoma, where he received a Bachelor of Arts in Public Affairs and Administration and a Master of Public Administration. Originally from Las Vegas, Nevada, he has lived in Oklahoma for over a decade. So welcome to our district staffers from Colorado and Oklahoma. So let's get started. And let's talk a bit about what makes district visits unique. If you've joined us before in previous webinars, we really focused in on meetings on Capitol Hill. District visits are a little bit unique in that individual members of Congress, their schedules are extremely hectic when they're in Washington. There's dozens of different issues and commitments pulling them in different directions, from, it's hard for them to find enough time to meet with constituents and manage and direct their staff, and then review constituent input and attend hearings. And sometimes it's even hard enough for them to even have enough time to eat and sleep. So once they have an opportunity through the state and district work periods, which is more commonly known as congressional recess, it gives them time away from DC to kind of return to their home districts and have a little bit more time to meet with constituents directly and get away from the kind of that hustle and bustle of DC. And the benefit for you as a constituent, so unless you live near DC, congressional recesses are the best times to actually get access to your federal legislators and meet with them. Many of them publish notices on their official websites about the events that they're attending in the district or states. So you can check on their calendars, look for notices in the local media that'll provide an idea of what they're doing. Some of the things that you can do is schedule a meeting, which we'll be kind of talking about today. You can also attend district events such as town hall meetings. Sometimes members hold open houses at their offices. And you can also invite your member to tour your institution, facility, lab, your site. There is in the handouts section of the GoToWebinar platform, there's a handout in there that is a toolkit about how you can invite your member to tour your institution or facility. So I encourage you to check that out and download that. So let's talk a little bit about scheduling a district visit meeting. So first, you'll want to find the right person. One of the easiest ways to get in touch with a congressional office is simply to call them. And an easy way to get this info is just by looking the member up via the House or Senate website that's located here on this slide. Once you find the contact information for the local office, call and share your desire to meet with the member of Congress or their relevant staff regarding the issue area you'd like to discuss. You can ask for the name of the staffer who works on that issue that you're concerned about if you want to set up a meeting with them. More times than not, you will meet with the staffer who advises the member on the issues that you're concerned about. It's important to note that staffers are the kind of the eyes and ears of the member, and they're irreplaceable in making sure that your voice will be heard as a constituent. And then also be sure to confirm whether or not the office is holding meetings in person or if they're virtual, as we're kind of transitioning in this kind of post-COVID world. Once you have their name, make sure to go ahead and send them a brief email identifying yourself as a constituent and what you would like to discuss during the meeting. You also want to provide kind of a window of time that you would like to meet with the member and or staffer, but make sure that you're flexible in your scheduling, as members and staffers typically have very busy schedules. And then you want to confirm and follow up about 24 to 48 hours ahead of your scheduled meeting, just to connect, confirm that the meeting is still taking place, and use that time to see if there's any kind of questions that they may have in advance of the meetings that you can kind of help prepare. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Duffy.
Thanks, Michael. Those are all great ways to get started. So let me tell you a little bit about how your district meeting may progress. You've got the right staff person, you've got the meeting set. So you're showing up for your meeting either in person or virtually. What are you going to do? Well, we're going to introduce yourself. And if you're working with a group, bringing one or more scientists with you, make sure everyone has an opportunity to introduce themselves and say a little bit about where they're from and what they do. Get the information about your staffer, what their title is within the office and what they do. And then it's really important to spend a few minutes really getting to know the staff person. It helps calm your nerves and sort of is a groundbreaker for them. But you're trying to establish a relationship with the staff person. As Michael said, they are the eyes and ears for the congressman, and they have so much experience from a different line of expertise than you. So spend a few moments getting to know them. Are they from the district originally, or did they come here? Congressional districts are large and sort of uniquely shaped, so they may be from a part of the district that you're unfamiliar with. So go ahead and ask them questions about what they do for the congressman and their background. That will also help you recognize the level of specificity that you can get in with your science. Some staffers are really well versed in science, others are incredibly broad versed in an array of issues, and they know a little bit about a lot of different things. So getting an understanding of what their background and training may be can help you set your tone for your interactions with them. Then you're going to want to tell them a little bit about your job. Provide the background, what it is that you do, your science, the things that you're working on. Avoid too much jargon and don't provide too much data. We as scientists tend to think the proof is in the numbers, and we tend to overwhelm people with the amount of data that we can provide, and that can be difficult to absorb and recall. So try to limit your jargon and limit your data, providing the facts and sort of the impacts of the science that you're working on. This is where you want to get local as well. When we talk about coming into DC for geoscience congressional visit stays, we're talking about national level things. But when you're meeting with the district office, this is where you really have that unique opportunity to bring the local impacts of the work that you're doing. Talk about the number of scientists that you have in your lab or the students that you're working on their postdoc. Talk about a local concern that you've been able to address or a problem that you're working to solve. These things are really important at the district office because they are more uniquely focused on serving constituent needs in the congressional district or the state if you're meeting with your senator. Be prepared to have an ask. The staff are expecting you to tell them what you need so that they can help you. If you don't have a specific ask, whether it's supporting a piece of legislation or voting no on a piece of legislation, or whether you're seeking additional funding in a federal program, it's perfectly okay to say you're just there to build a relationship, that you're there to provide information and offer yourself as a resource to the staff. That sets their expectations about what they need to do. So if you do have a specific ask, if there's a problem that you have with a local or a regional governing board and you need some congressional help on that, go ahead and let them know that that's the sort of advice and help you're going to be seeking. But if you're there just to let them know about the work that you do, let them have that experience as well. Share your message. This is a great time to also tell a story. We've uncovered that human beings are much more likely to remember a story than they are a list of facts and dates. So if you can talk about a problem that you've overcome or a situation where there was a humorous or sort of inspiring outcome, those are things that are going to make your interactions with these staffers memorable. And I do recommend doing some research ahead of time. Michael listed the House.gov and the Senate.gov websites. That's a great place for you to find out what committees your member of Congress sits on, what legislation that they're supporting or legislation that they've supported in the past. You also can see key issues that they're interested in on their websites, whether it's Veterans Affairs, natural resources, national security, and you can tailor your message to be in line with what those missions of the office are. So spend a little bit of time before you have your meeting looking at what your congressman or senator does in back in DC. Let me see if I can do this. Michael, I can't advance. Oh, sorry, I do want to do this one. Michael's absolutely right. He put that note there for me. It's okay to ask questions. You want to make sure that this is a dialogue and not sort of like a lecture. So make sure that you're asking questions along the way. And it's okay if you're asked a question, if you don't know the answer, it's better to say, let me get back to you on that, than provide information that's inaccurate that you have to correct at a later date. So can you do the next slide for me, Michael? Perfect. Your meeting's gone well. You're all done. All excited to either cancel the meeting for all on a Zoom or head out into the sunshine. In the short term, you do want to make sure you follow up with the staffer with whom you've met within 24 to 48 hours. You want to thank them for their time. They have carved out time from their day to be with you, so you want to thank them for their time. You also want to get answers back to any questions that they may have raised that you couldn't answer during your visit. And if you don't have those, give them a timeline for when you think you can get that information to them. Also, again, reiterate that you are there to be a resource for the office and make sure that your email includes all of your contact information. Long term, we're looking for you to be continuing advocates for your science. So you want to set a reminder in your calendar to check back in with that staffer with whom you met in maybe say a month or 6 weeks, just to see if anything has come up or are there any questions that you can answer for the office. But in the meantime, in the interim, if something happens, you see an article or an op-ed in a local paper, you make an amazing discovery in your science, feel free to pass that along to the staff as well. This is a way that they can help stay abreast with what you're doing in the district. I also highly encourage you to sign up for all of the office's socials. Follow them on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Discord, Twitch, whatever it is they're using, YouTube. You can also sign up for their weekly newsletters. That's a great way for you to stay informed with what your member of Congress is doing, not only on issues that directly impact you, but all across the board. And finally, I encourage you to find additional ways that you can advocate for your science. Hopefully, as Michael said, we're coming out of this post-COVID world where we're getting back to having meetings in person and having those national fly-ins. So if an opportunity arises for you to come to DC and participate in one of your association or organization's congressional fly-in days, I highly encourage you to do that. If you can't leave town or it's impossible for the timing wise for you to come to DC for those events, go ahead and look at your sponsoring organization, whether it's AGU, SSA, GSA. Take a look on their websites. We have lots of toolkits and webinars that we've recorded on your behalf that will show you how you can still be engaged in policy, but from your local level, from your district level. And I think with that, we are about done, right?
I believe so. So go ahead and move on to.
So that was a brief overview and how you should get in touch with your representative's district office and what to expect. But now the reason why you all signed on, let's admit it, is you want to hear from the experts. And we are thrilled to have with us Sally Anderson. As said, she's with Congressman Negus's office from Colorado, and Will McPherson from Congressman Cole's office in Oklahoma to answer your questions, help solve any problems that you might have. Again, Will, Sally, thank you so much for joining us today. I've got a few questions that were pre-populated from our participants. And one of them is, how often do constituents actually schedule meetings during the August recess? Sally, you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. Well, first off, I would say too that I was looking through the AGU's toolkit for setting up district meetings, and it's a fantastic resource. So definitely take a look at that. They've put together a lot of great pointers. I would say a lot of constituents asked to request meetings in August. And one of the things I was going to say is make sure to get your request in pretty early. I know for us, we start planning August recess in May, June, July. And so August recess is a great place to request a meeting, but also a reminder that our bosses are home in the district every month as well. They have district work periods, usually a week per month. So if August doesn't work out because of their busy schedules and everybody requesting for that, I would recommend looking at the other times they're home too, because that's often a good place to go.
That's a great point. Will, what about you in Oklahoma? Are you seeing lots of constituents coming in to meet with Congressman Cole? Who's my old boss?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually I find in August, it's a pretty good mix of people outwardly reaching out to our district team and trying to set up stuff, and then us going out into the community and finding good opportunities for the congressman to go interact. So we really do try to keep it 60-40 about that way, where 40% are the people that are coming to us, and then we always want to make sure a lot of the people that aren't contacting our office usually don't know to do so. They don't have great resources like you do here to give you a great outline, which that was a great outline. It hit on a bunch of stuff I was going to recommend. So we do have a lot of outreach, but one thing that I always tell people to do, and I think is the underrated tool, is going to look at the congressional calendar. The congressional calendar will be your guiding light. It's my North Star that I operate for all vacations, for personal life, for all the above. And it doesn't always hold. It's not always correct, but it does generally tell you when the congressman will be in DC and when they'll be back in the district. And it's pretty color coded, so you'll be able to snipe out kind of a few weeks. If it's not August, it can be like Sally laid out, it can be a week here, a week there. So I always tell people, don't get discouraged if you don't get the meeting. You know, sometimes people get all upset. It's like, it can't work out. Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? It's totally okay. Congress goes 2 years until we go to the next one, and we got plenty of time, and we always want to make it work. So it's never, sometimes people are like, did I say something wrong? Or a lot of people want to talk to the congressman, so it's usually no problem at all. But if you go look at that calendar, you get ahead of the ask. So hey, I got in 2 months, I would love to sit down with the congressman. Find your staffer who you kind of want to have be your person, and whether that's the district scheduler or one of the field reps. The field reps are a great resource that maybe if you have a district that has something very specific in a certain part, Usually a lot of our districts are fairly large, and we have field reps that represent different areas. I know for our congressional office, we have 3 district offices. And Sally, I'm sure you have maybe 2. Get to know the field rep that represents your area where you're doing the study. So we have the University of Oklahoma in ours. We have a field rep that exclusively represents the northern part. For us, that would be a very good person to get to know. So I would say get to know your field rep in your area for wherever your facility is or where you're doing a lot of your work at, and engage with them, and then just get ahead of it and use that North Star with the congressional calendar.
Great. Michael, let's make sure we send all of our participants a link to the House and the Senate calendars.
Will do. And just a reminder for our attendees today, if you have a question, please drop those in the Q&A box for our participants today.
So another question that we had, which I thought was a great one, I was really glad that somebody asked it, is what kind of information is useful for the constituent to bring to you on this initial meeting? So I'll let Sally jump in again.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you all covered a lot of it too, which was super helpful. You're taking all my talking points, but I think as Elizabeth and Michael were mentioning, the meetings in the district, what's really helpful for us is, of course, an overview of what you do and the importance of it, but also just what is the impact on the district and on the state. So how many employees do you have? And that's a huge economic driver for the district. You know, how many people in a district does your work affect? What local issues is it helping to address? All of these things are super helpful for us, and also just bringing that story component and, you know, getting to know each other as human beings, and also just, you know, if there are impacts that your work has done, putting a face and a name to that too is super helpful for us. So, and I would also say, you know, a lot of times the members' time, as in DC meetings, are pretty tightly scheduled and short. So it's a lot to get into a pretty limited amount of time. But I think if you're super well organized and have a structure and know what you want to get across, those have always been the most effective meetings for me, and have been super helpful for us to just kind of get a real sense of what's going on with science in the community. So,
anything to add, Will?
Yeah, no, great point by Sally. I always like to think DC member, district member, there is a bit of a different mindset. Not to say that they are different people in those 2 places, but when they are out of the halls of Congress and back comfortable in their district that they call home, it is just a different vibe, right? You just can't get around it. And so people always like to say, well, I got to get to DC, and they're always like scrambling. They want to spend thousands of dollars, which I always say is really important, because you do need to meet the DC staff, and who doesn't like to go to DC for a little bit of a trip and do some team bonding as well and hit a bunch of members all in a row. But when you're back in the district, you do get more time. You do get a little bit more of undivided attention, and there is value there. And then you got to tell the story about why it affects the district. That's why we are here in our jobs. We have, depending on your district, 750,000 to 800,000 of your close personal friends in your congressional district. And we care, especially district staffers. Not that our DC staff doesn't, but we live here too. And we want to do things that benefit the district. So when you come to the meetings, just know that you're meeting with a bunch of people that live in the district too, and they want to do things that are outwardly helpful to the district. And that's why we get into this, and that's why we do all of that we do. And then my second piece in that is Congressman Cole serves on the Appropriations Committee. And so a lot of times people are coming and they're asking for, hey, you know, I'd like this program, I'd like that program. It's always super helpful to have what exactly the ask is and what umbrella it falls under. And so for us, it's kind of like, hey, you know, we got this great program, it's this and that. Okay, our immediate question would be, you know, what program within the Labor H budget approach bill does that fall under? So if you can kind of get into that little bit more granular level, that will help us immediately get with our staff and get with committee staff to make sure we accurately get done or pass on the information that you want passed on.
So since lots of constituents are talking money, it's usually about increasing their budgets or making sure that cuts to their budgets are restored. Would you recommend that they start with that budget request at the district office or at the DC office? Like, what is the best way for them to come to you and say, hey, my program's about to get decimated. Is there anything you can do to help? Will?
So yeah, I'll take that. I obviously you're going to have a DC component, but I think it's always more impactful when you have a district staffer that you know and you've been working with. Again, I go back to the field rep example. Or if you want to get to know the district director, that's always great too. But usually the field reps just are a lot more accessible because we're usually handling all the fires of the day. So you start with them. You say, hey, here's the district impact. Here's our ask. Can you introduce me to the DC staffer that handles this issue so I can have a conversation? So all the time I'm always putting together kind of meet emails where it's like, hey, I've been working with so-and-so in the district. This is their program. This is what they've been working on. We've met with them in district before. They're having this problem. I wanted to introduce you to and let you take it from here. And usually that's a lot more impactful than just calling up to DC and saying, hey, I have a request for da-da-da. They get a lot of that. So it's a lot more impactful when you go through the district office and have that person doing the handoff rather than just doing the cold call, even if you do have a relationship with the DC staffer.
Sally, anything to add? Does that work in your office that way too?
Sorry, I'm still getting used to the webinar function. Yes, I would say so too. And I think that just kind of goes back to like creating an ongoing relationship with your district office and your district staff. That way, when those funding questions do come up and those asks do come up, you already have a good relationship and you know that the district staff can help advocate for you. I think that's helpful. And I was just going to go back to of just what else is helpful for our office and just reemphasize the tour piece is really great. And it's a really great way for us as staff to fully understand. I'm not a scientist, so I like seeing everything and having people walk me through it is a much easier way for me to conceptualize your work than even a sit down meeting. And I think for my boss as well, we're in Boulder and Fort Collins, so we have a lot of federal labs, and I know that's something that he really enjoys going out and doing, especially on these work periods when he likes to be out and about in the community. So I would say that's great. And just another component of that, we have sometimes added on like an employee town hall. So we've done things where we go and tour a lab or we tour part of the university where you all are working, and then doing an informal town hall with the congressman right after. So I think it's there's creative ways to get your message and your work across, I think, in the district.
Good. I hope everyone's taking notes of that. Make sure you try to invite your member of Congress to your site, to your university, to your lab.
Going on field trips.
Field trips. Everybody, we love them since the 4th grade. We all love field trips. So Sally, what makes a bad meeting?
It's a good question. I think just not coming prepared and not being prepared to share your story. Again, I think that's such a huge component for us of just what your impact is. I wouldn't say that if you don't check all the things on the box in the toolkit, it's not a bad meeting. It's still going to be fine. You're still building a relationship, and that's a great thing. And you're still talking with the office. So that's all good. But I think there is just such an opportunity when you do get that meeting that you want to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row to make it as impactful as possible.
What about you, Will? What makes a bad meeting?
Don't be late. If you're late, I used to be a field rep too. It's my greatest pet peeve of like, I have the congressman scheduled down to like 5-minute breaks in between meetings, bathroom breaks even. Like, I just think of it on that granular level. And when someone's just like, oh my gosh, I'm running 15 minutes late, I'm like, well, you just blew up my schedule. Thanks a lot. So that is huge. And obviously things happen. So just be real about it, but don't think like, oh, I'll just get there 5 minutes before and it'll be fine. Traffic happens, life happens, but that can be a really good way to make sure that they are upset with you before the meeting even starts. From there, if you come into the meeting and you just don't say anything, those are like the worst meetings I've ever been in, where people, I think they get intimidated, and I really try to go out of my way to make it like very fun, informal, and my member's great with that too. But if they aren't talking and like it feels like we're doing all the talking because we like want it to be a good thing, and then they just won't, like they give one-word answers, and you're like, okay, so good meeting, which is totally fine if you're just a little shy, but just be comfortable. That's always, we like to have meetings that are fun, and I hope that our constituents have that too. It's obviously a very formal setting. You're meeting with the congressman, you have this official request, but I would always say deep breath, be yourself, have fun. Don't be afraid to ask questions outside of exactly what you're asking for if they're interesting or affect the members' committee work or what they're working on. Feel free to engage with them on things that are tangential to the things that you're working on, or thank them for something that you've done before. But also, if the member, and Sally and I represent members that are different parties, and of course everyone's going to have different things, and we may agree on certain things, we may not agree on others. If we don't agree on everything, don't get perturbed, don't shut down, don't get mad. That it may just be a very specific thing. But that doesn't mean that you should completely shut off your advocacy, because you'd be surprised, hey, this one bill, it just is not our cup of tea for a myriad of reasons that are specific to it, but maybe your next one, absolutely. So don't burn the bridge if you don't get the immediate thumbs up.
Yeah, I like to tell my scientists, it's important to be polite to everyone, because, and this is not throwing anything out there, but this Congress's majority can be next Congress's minority and vice versa. So you want to make sure that you're not just contacting only the party in charge or working only with the offices that are in the majority party, because elections, sometimes it's 2, 4, 6 years will change majorities in the chamber. And you want to make sure that you're not starting from scratch to develop relationships with offices that are now the chairman positions as opposed to ranking member. I had a question about access to your offices. How are your district meetings going? Are they more in person, or are you sticking to like a virtual meeting schedule still? Sally?
Yeah, we are for the most part still virtual. I think we're trying to figure out what exactly the summer looks like. But I think the beauty of Colorado is sometimes we can do these meetings outside, so that's helpful. We have 300 days of sunshine, so typically our weather holds out pretty well. And so I think we're doing virtual, gonna probably move into maybe some hybrid, virtual / in-person, but kind of TBD, and it's week by week at the moment.
And what about with Congressman Cole?
Yeah, luckily our entire staff and the members fully vaccinated, have been for a while. So we've been, the good thing is I have a lot of very good relationships, and this is kind of speaking to this meeting, is I can feel comfortable kind of calling people and saying, hey, we want to have this interaction. Are you comfortable with this? Are you vaccinated? Do you want to do it indoor, outdoor? You want to do it online? It is very difficult to kind of toe that line, because some people really, they hate the virtual, and they're just like, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. And so you just have to figure out what's comfortable, what's of course safe for everyone, and what both sides can get out of it, what they want. But we do plan on doing in-person events in Oklahoma. We have a pretty rural, we have an interesting district. It's like 50% of our population is in a metro, and then 50% of it is in our rural area. So we're able to kind of be outside, try to keep it in the mornings when we're outside before it gets too hot. But you'll find that most offices are willing to work with you. And that's what we're doing right now. It's tough, no doubt, but we're just trying to make sure everyone feels comfortable and everyone's safe. So if you call our offices, you'll find out that we're willing to do just about anything as long as constituents happy.
So I know when scientists come to DC, there's a level of security to get through the buildings. They have to go through metal detectors to get into the Rayburn or the Cannon House office building. Even some buildings, they need to sign in. If it's the annex, like the Ford House office building, you need to sign in with the driver's license. When we go back to in-person meetings, will they have that level of security as well, or is it a little more informal? Sally?
You mean in DC or?
No, in your district offices.
Oh, in district offices. So I think it depends on the office. So some district offices are located in federal buildings, and I think you will see some higher levels of security in those, so just be prepared. I know some offices, they will make you go through like a security screening if they are in those federal buildings, just because that's the building protocol. For us, it's a little different. We just have folks sign in. Usually it's by appointment, but of course in normal times, not in a pandemic, we're typically pretty open and just have folks sign in. So it's a different security process, but I think, again, I would just double check the district office that you're going to before going.
Yeah,
Anything to add?
We're in an office building, so no metal detectors or anything like that. That's fairly typical, but if you're usually in a larger metro, you may have an office that's located, like Sally said, in a federal building, which, I mean, it isn't a huge hurdle as long as you are following US laws that would be enforced in a federal building. But I would always just say, hey, is there any extra securities at a federal building? Most of the time it's not, but it's always good to check.
Michael, I was sort of managing the questions that I was seeing. Are there any questions that I've missed, or do you have other questions you can bring forward from our members?
Let's see, I have not seen any questions in the chat, in the question box. Again, just a reminder, if you do have a question for our panelists, please drop that question in the Q&A box. But I do not have any additional questions. I think you've covered a lot of the ones that we had talked about.
So while I wait to see if anyone else has other questions, I was just wondering, because I'm intrigued, totally intrigued. I've only ever dealt with the DC-based staff. So what does a typical day look like for you, Sally? What do you do on what sort of fires are you attending to?
Yeah, definitely.
Will, you're prepared.
I got some fires.
It depends on the day for sure. I think one of the major differences, and I think you all covered this as far as district staff versus DC staff, is a lot of what we're doing here is constituent focus. So it's a lot of working with our staff on cases. So we submit inquiries to federal agencies for any issues that constituents in the district could have. So it could be anything from not getting a social security check on time to having issues with healthcare. Passports is a huge one right now. So it's helping to manage our team to make sure that we're covering all our bases and getting responses out to all of the constituents who are contacting our office for help, and just kind of figuring out broad picture wise, what can our office do to continue to assist the folks of the 2nd Congressional District. And of course, with fires that come up, it could be any number of things. But just really just managing the whole team, and then also managing the congressman's schedule and outreach when he's back here in town. So that's usually a pretty big task of trying to just map out. We have 10 counties in our district, so we go all the way up to the Wyoming border through central mountains of Breckenridge and Vail. And so we have a lot of ground to cover as a team, even when the congressman's not here. So like today, I'm going up to the Fish and Wildlife Center to do a tour with them. So it's kind of being the eyes and ears for him when he can't be all places at once.
And what about you, Will?
Yeah, passports right now, it's like the perfect storm. If only we could have seen it coming from way away. But no, special shout out to Sally in the state of Colorado. Aurora has a great passport office that we've been sending a lot of our constituents to, because we don't have one in Oklahoma, and Dallas has been a problem. But our job is to make sure that it's more like the meat and potatoes of being represented in Congress. I mean, our job is to make sure if our constituents have a problem with the federal government or a federal agency, that we try to fix it. And so it literally, if you can think of any federal agency and all of the possible issues that a US citizen may have with it, that's what we do. So our job is to send everyone home after they bring us a problem, after they've been exhausted, they've gone everywhere else, they're totally mad, and they finally call their congressman to help. And so that's where we step in, and hopefully, I always say we never promise outcomes, but we can promise to get you an answer and try. And so some of our best interactions, and actually sometimes turn into district events, are when we engage with our constituents and help them out on those types of things. Secondarily, it's just being out in the district. I don't like to be, well, in this role as district director, you're in the office a little bit more than you'd like, but field reps, I don't want them in the office. I never do. I want them out in the communities, engaging with people, hearing about things that you wouldn't hear about unless someone called you. It's being proactive. I always say you got to be a hunter and a gatherer as a field rep, and so you got to go out and hunt some good opportunities, something that you may have seen in the newspaper of a cool thing that's happening in your district, or I've heard from someone else this is a problem, so I wanted to call to engage, or just start cold calling companies about, hey, I read about you here and I just want to stop by for a cup of coffee. It's all about engagement for us, and making sure that people feel like this isn't, people get all freaked out when it's the congressman, it's the federal government, why are you contacting me? And I always like to just kind of knock down that wall and say, hey, we're literally here to serve you, and we want to engage with you, whether you have an ask or not. We just want to let you know that we're here. And so it's casework, it's outreach, it's making sure our DC staff knows what's important in our district, which is huge. Because sometimes DC and district, I mean, they're just operating on different platforms, and there's no problem with that. That's why we have the two. But sometimes I'll see a voting recommendation and I'm like, whoa, that will be a problem if you, and they're like, they have it all right, you know, because, oh, it makes sense here and here. But I'm like, that's a big problem because we have this facility in the district or this group that is very vehemently against it, those types of things. So we always just try to have that information exchange between DC and there. And then when the congressman comes back from DC and they're on recess, we call it district work period, where we just run them around and make sure they don't get to put their feet up.
Sally, can you add to that about the relationship between the district office and the DC office? Is there a direct sort of like one-to-one? You're deputy chief of staff, so does that mean that you have input into the DC office as well? How does that relationship work?
Yeah, we have a great relationship with our district and DC staff. We try to make it as one-to-one as possible and align people's issue areas that they work on in the district with the same group of issues that a DC staffer is working on. So we encourage our staff to talk at least once a week, just to kind of touch base on what are the big things happening in the district, what are things happening in DC. As Will said, sometimes there's votes and legislation coming up that might not totally match what we're hearing back home. And so those conversations and that relationship is really key. And I think, you know, the kind of the silver lining of COVID and having everything virtual is for a lot of these meetings, we've been able to have our district staffer hop in on some of these fly-in meetings, so they can listen and hear what those asks are, and vice versa, and having the DC team being able to hop in on some of our constituent calls or calls with nonprofits and community leaders. And so that's actually been pretty helpful. But yeah, the one-to-one is as much as we can get it. Obviously, it doesn't always line up depending on the members' committees and everything and their priorities, but it's been super helpful for us, and we try to emphasize that as much as possible on our team.
Good. Anything to add on that, Will?
I've heard some horror stories from other offices about their district to DC relationship, but it's our office is a lot like Sally's. Our chief of staff is one of my best friends and used to be the district director. So that actually makes it pretty easy for us to be able to go back and forth and have some frank conversations. But yeah, we always direct connection. There is no big wall that I put up where you have to go to me before you go to DC staff. It's just making sure, I always say, be thoughtful when it's going both ways, so you aren't just plopping something. What do you think about this? It's like, whoa, what is this? Making sure you do your homework on the front end. And then another thing that I think is huge that most people don't realize is DC staff comes to district and they have issue specific areas that work probably on stuff that people on this call really care about. And so working with your field rep and saying, hey, next time that staffer's in the district, I would love to have them out to the facility, out to coffee, out for lunch, out for a drink, whatever fits your model. But I always find when DC staff comes to district, they love that because they're always just, in DC and they don't get to have the back and forth that the member does. So showing them, and at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones managing what you care about. That is such an underrated point of contact. And so if you work with your field rep ahead of time, say, hey, next time you get that staffer in town that you introduced me to, I'd love to show it off. That's a totally underrated move, and I highly recommend it.
That is some great information. Well, I've been doing all the asking and the questioning and following up with our members' questions. Is there anything that you want to tell us? Did we miss anything? Are there any key points? Are there other good opportunities for our scientists to try to engage both the district office and maybe the member that we didn't cover? And I'll start with Sally.
Yeah, I was just gonna hop on of what Will said of a lot of the DC staff come out in August as well. So that's a really prime time, of course, ask for the meeting with the member and see if you can, but having the DC staff come take a tour is super helpful as well. Or having just a meeting with them or getting coffee with them is super helpful too. And then I think just reemphasizing the creative ways you can interact with the district offices. So I think it was mentioned that, we typically have town halls or we have other community events. And even if you're not doing the one-on-one sit down in an office, there's still a lot of really helpful ways for you all to engage with us and to build that relationship. And, I have folks that are like our regular town hall people. I know them, I see them every single time. Yeah. I know Kate's going to be at every single town hall we do, like in this area of our district. And so those are helpful because it builds a relationship. And I think that's just such a key part. But yeah, I'm happy to be a resource too if folks on the webinar have questions after this. I know they have my email, so happy to, if there's any questions that pop up after, happy to respond to those.
And Will, what did I miss? What did we miss?
No, you guys are doing a really good job. My father's a physician, my mom's a nurse, my sister's an accountant, and I'm me. So I always try to explain this to them, and it's like speaking a different language, and I'm like, it's really not that hard. Just be nice, be normal, and reach out. Any congressional office wants to help, and so it should never be seen as, well, I wonder if they will. Regardless of if we're supporting what you're doing or not, we want to engage, and so never feel like, oh, I don't know, that's kind of this or that. That's why you build a relationship, and with the people in district, I always say sometimes groups can get a little miffed if they don't get the meeting with the member. But I always say it's better to meet with the staff before you have the meeting with the member, because then you already have the relationship. The staffer can speak to, we have a binder full of notes that we give the member every morning when they're having their meetings, that they can speak to what you're actually going to be asked. So they'll probably be able to do some of your homework ahead of time. And then there isn't that kind of almost awkward, hey, how are you? Hello, Congressman. You already have the relationship with the staffer, and you can bring it in, and it's a lot more fun that way. Number two, I would just tell you, get creative. I always ask my groups, they're always like, well, what do you want? I don't want anything. I don't need you to do a specific way you want the event. Of course, we have some parameters, but get creative. If you want to engage, the leadership of your group, that's great. If you want to bring in some people who are just everyday workers who can speak to how this directly affects them everyday life, that's awesome. Is there a county impact? Bring in a county commissioner. Is there a city impact? Bring in the mayor. I always love getting groups across different ways to all be talking at the same time, because a lot of times you'll figure out, wow, we all are kind of hearing about the same thing, or we're all working on the same thing, but then it's just, 2 birds, 3 birds, 4 birds, 1 stone, and then it's a more interesting, interactive engagement. So I always tell people, get creative. Our job is to show up. It's your choice of what you want the interaction to be like. So never feel like you got to be in that cookie cutter mold where, hey, we're going to the congressional office, we're all going to be wearing suits and we're going to talk about X. That's totally fine, and we do it all the time, and I love it. But if you're like, hey, why don't you come out here and we're going to introduce you to so-and-so and do this, be creative. People love that. And then it just adds to the memory, like you laid out and Sally laid out, that you remember that. And my favorite thing, and when I think I've done my job correctly, is when I'm watching my member in a hearing and he references a story from back in the district. I love that. That's like the best for me. So that should always be the goal. And always just know that offices want to be helpful. So just let them be helpful and work with them, but always give them enough time.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, I have cleared through all of our questions.
Looks like we have, looks like we do have a question from one of our attendees. So the question says, I'm curious if you could comment on effective ways for scientists to engage with policymakers. I'm currently a PhD student and looking more into the overlap between science communication and policy. Are there any good examples you have of effective science and policy relationships? Have either your offices benefited from science policy internships or fellowships? And if so, what made those relationships successful?
All right,
Sally.
I'll start on that one.
Oh, no, all right, well, you jumped in first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw me having to go first the whole time, so I'll take this one offer. So as it relates to like science, super science specific in our offices, there's always chances, depending on the committee that we're on, that it might make sense. Now, a lot of folks if you're on, like I know Sally's members on judiciary. That's probably not the best fit for a super data-driven science deal. Maybe it is, I don't know. But finding a member that kind of fits that mold, or outside of that, sometimes it's not always great to, or the perfect fit to jump in the office, but offering data around the stuff and saying, hey, I'm a resource on this. I know that I know less about what you are advocating on, or at least the world that you're on. So why am I trying to be the expert? You're the expert. Feel free to engage me, and don't feel like you're like, well, I don't want to seem like I'm lecturing him or her. Well, the whole point is there's no chance I know what you guys are working on better than you. So feel free and just break. Don't give us like a uber technical, but just kind of speak to it at a 30,000 foot level, and then we can always drill down. And then outside of that, this is a good example. Right now, we have a district intern who does not want to get into politics, does not have any interest in working in government, but he wants to be a hospital administrator and wants to interact with Medicare, Medicaid a lot. And so he wanted to come see the government side of it, on top of doing all the other district staff stuff that an intern does. And so like that's a great example of, hey, you don't have to be, want to be in Congress or work in a congressional staff to be able to engage on this. Always just being engaged is important, but it doesn't have to just be a perfect fit. Always just work with the office and talk with them and see what the opportunities are.
Sally, can you add to that?
Yeah, I would say, what Will said is on point. And, I think just making sure that the office knows that you can be a resource, especially for those policy pieces, because yes, the committees definitely, kind of influence where the members' passion and their focus is, but also there could be legislation that comes up that has some sort of wonky science part that we don't exactly know how to navigate, and just knowing the resources we have at hand in the district is super helpful. So we can go to you and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or does this make sense? Or it's just always helpful to have a group of people that we can connect with on that.
Yeah, great example. Anything that has, we have the Oklahoma Geological Survey right in our district, right at the University of Oklahoma. If there's ever anything that comes up on that, I have a contact there, boom. They know more than I do. It's just kind of like having it in your head of like, if that area of science or whatever comes up and we want to clarify it, or at least run it by someone in the district to make sure we understand it the way they understand it, super helpful. So great point by Sally.
Michael, did you have a follow-up?
There is no follow-up questions right now.
All right.
They're tired of me talking.
No. You guys have given us a of information. It's been fabulous. I've been doing this for over a decade and I learned a lot of stuff. So I know that our scientists and attendees are incredibly well informed, even more so than they were an hour ago. Thank you so much for taking so much of your time today to meet with us and talk us through how to have a good district meeting and establish those great relationships with the district staff. I really do appreciate it. Michael, go ahead and throw our emails up there. If people have any additional information or questions, go ahead and contact Michael or me, and we will pass along your emails as well if you're comfortable with that, in case any of your constituents who are on the call have a direct question for you. Thank you again for taking time on a Friday to come and chat with us and inform us on how we can better influence our district offices and our members of Congress. We really do appreciate your time. Again, everyone, thank you for joining our webinar on advocating close to home, and look forward to our next one, which will be in probably after the August recess. So get out there, schedule a meeting with your member. August work period. Apologies.
I didn't get that in, sorry.
So keep a lookout for our next briefing, which will probably be sometime in late September. Again, have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys. Nice to meet you, Sally.
You too.
Good luck in August.
Yes.